Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Amit. Okay, Palantir's investment in Adtheorent. This is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm very excited to talk about this topic, particularly because I have a lot of thoughts about the advertising market and the future of the advertising market, and this is a SPAC deal with Palantir. Now, on this channel, I have about $27,000 invested into Palantir, so I do a lot of due diligence. I try to cover the company. I try to give a lot of thoughts and analysis. The SPAC hypothesis behind Palantir is that they are investing in other companies that they believe are going to be rich in data and ultimately use data to leverage the way they scale their businesses, because Palantir is a data-driven company. So Palantir has invested in about 14 SPACs. I'm doing a lot of videos. There's going to be a whole playlist on this channel covering each of those investments and talking about my thoughts on them. And this is another one of those SPAC investments that has been done. I did another video talking all about the SPAC strategy long-term. I'll leave that in the description. You can check that out if you're more interested in that. Adtheorent is a machine learning AI, ML AI. We say that a lot on this channel because Palantir invests and does a lot of stuff with ML AI company that helps target digital advertising throughout the entire world. So their entire business model is built upon using machine learning as a programmatic digital advertising company offering customers very specific business solutions in a variety of different sectors through a variety of different mediums by which they ultimately make these investments. Now, Palantir invested on a PIPE on a SPAC deal, which is a private investment in public equity, with the MCAP Acquisition Corp. So when a SPAC goes public, you raise a bunch of money, you get a bunch of investors that put that money, and then you kind of merge it with the company that's ultimately going public. In this case, it's Adtheorent with the acquisition company name. In this case, it's MCAP. And then you have a public company. Now, a couple quotes that I want to present, and then I'm going to get into some analysis. Adtheorent CEO Jim Lawson said that we are extremely excited for Palantir's investment and their belief in our long-term vision for our business. So they are happy that Palantir are investors in their company. And Lawson also said a partnership between the two companies will help make data more efficient for customers. Partnering with Palantir can help identify data insights quickly and find relationships between data. Okay, so let's get into my take and sort of my thoughts and my analysis about this. First thing, macro level, is it's a little bit hilarious to me when I found out this was happening because Palantir doesn't like ads. What I mean by that is they're not big on advertising. And I'll explain why in a second, but it's also partly the reason why they're not growing as much right now because they suck at sales. As someone who's invested in Palantir, I understand that their company is built for product and not sales. And actually, Alex Karp just did an interview that I'm going to do a reaction to in a couple of days where he said, look, we're good at product. We're not that good at sales and marketing. And the reason we're not that good at sales and marketing is because we think we have the best product in the world. I'm not saying he said this is my analysis, but they're obviously not good at selling it because when you're focused solely on product, and really Palantir is one of those products that is focused solely on product that's been subsidized by the government over the past 20 years, so they didn't really have to focus on sales and marketing. It's a little bit harder to cross into the commercial sector where you have to sell a product when you just have built the product to make it as successful as it is. Tesla is one of the only examples of companies I know that really doesn't have to focus on sales and marketing because the car is so amazing. The data they have is so intelligent. It's a trillion times better than every other electric vehicle startup or company that like they don't know how to do anything. And Elon is the visionary character where he can tweet something and those tweets go viral and 63 million followers on Twitter, 120,000 followers per day that he averages on Twitter in new people who discover him means that you're going to be able to sell things very easily, especially when you have the vision that he has. So Palantir is not one of those companies. Alex Karp is not that crazy visionary. He's a visionary guy, but he's not the crazy visionary that Elon is in terms of we're going to Mars. And Palantir itself is a company that is so focused on the product that they really have a hard time with marketing and sales. Now, the reason they have a hard time with marketing sales is, again, they don't care that much about marketing and sales. They care more about product. But also the philosophy, the culture that is embedded in the company is that we don't care about selling ads. Alex Karp has said on multiple interviews that Silicon Valley has persuaded the world's top engineers to go optimize how to get our attention to be focused within cycles of dopamine in which we can consume more content and see more ads. And machine learning and AI models and the smartest engineers in the world in Silicon Valley have simply focused their attention not on creating an impact in the world, but figuring out how to get more people to consume more ads by optimizing for more attention and clicks in order for these big tech companies to make more money. Alex Karp is very against that. He says a lot of these companies are full of BS, and this is partly the reason they're not in Silicon Valley. They're in Denver, Colorado, because he wanted the company and the culture of the company to be fully away from the nature of what Silicon Valley has become and make it go back to what Silicon Valley should have been, which is building stuff that helps the world's change and really innovate and progress. Which is why it's a little bit funny that they're working with an ad company, right? Because you're talking about a company that doesn't like ads or doesn't like the whole process of building ads, but now they're working and investing in an entire company that's optimizing for advertising. The reason I think they're doing this is primarily because they understand that media is a huge opportunity. And that's the first thing we're going to talk about here. Media is an absolutely phenomenal opportunity that exists. So Palantir never wanted to become a media company, or they never wanted to become an advertising company, which is what most social media, social platforms are. They have to create media or create a platform in order for people to consume media, i.e. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and then they have to sell ads against that, right? Now, YouTube does a good job because they actually pay their creators with the ad partner program, but a lot of other companies, they don't really pay creators. So that's where sort of it's like they just amalgamate all this attention and then profit on the backs of it. Palantir never wanted to become a media company. They never wanted to become an advertising company, but they do want to help the world scale things that need to be scaled when data drives those businesses at scale. And Adtheorent, the more research I'm doing into it, the more that I'm learning about it, is one of those companies that could potentially be a very, very strong company when it comes to scaling digital advertising. If Foundry can be one of the flagship softwares integrated into a lot of these companies in order to drive their data to be able to make better decisions to get their customers better results on their advertising, then media is a big opportunity. I don't think it's $1 trillion opportunity. I would say it's a multi-$100 billion opportunity at the lower scale, right? Advertising in general, I believe, is a $450 billion market worldwide, and that's probably a little conservative. It's probably maybe 600-700 when you really add everything up. But if Palantir can get just a slice of that, right, we're talking about maybe 5, 10, 15% of it over the next 10 years and be the flagship software that actually makes data, actually makes advertising based around data, then I think that's a really big opportunity. Now, this is a confusing opportunity as much as it is a big opportunity, and there's two fundamental reasons for this. Number one, I'll lay out the two reasons and then I'll get into them. Number one is businesses changing their models from advertising to subscription, which is a very big deal. And we're going to talk about that in a second. And number two is the nature of advertising models simply fading away because of decentralized blockchain Web3 technology that new platforms that are hacking our attention are going to be using as the framework for their platforms. So let's get first into subscriptions. Subscriptions is a big deal, okay? Advertisements are not as interesting to people to want to consume. The reason for this is because ads at the end of the day are a bit annoying. And we all understand that ads are a bit annoying. I think advertising is actually a phenomenal business model. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, which is why I think it's going to be able to sustain itself in the long term. But at the end of the day, you got to admit some ads are annoying, right? So a lot of businesses, especially Web3 companies, startups that are starting in 2021, 2022, they're recognizing that the companies that benefited the most off advertising as a fundamental business model, Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, YouTube's part of Google, they're so big and so dominant that they have truly dominated how, TikTok as well, truly have dominated how to take attention, put it in one place, and then show a crap ton of ads under that attention and make a lot of money on the back end from that. YouTube, obviously, I think being the best because they actually pay people for giving their content. The other platforms don't really do that. That business model is getting old. And because that business model is getting old, it is harder and harder to justify for a lot of startups. And I'm in the startup world, so I'm understanding, I have conversations with VCs. I see how they talk about this stuff. A lot of times they're just like, we don't like ads anymore. I think it's boring. I mean, you think of Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen Horowitz is one of the biggest venture firms in the United States, in the world. Forget the United States. They recently just got $10 billion off a $200 million investment in Coinbase when Coinbase went public. So I think 2014, 2015, they had to put $200 million of capital into Coinbase in order to get that $10 billion back. And that $10 billion was the entire amount of the fund they even had raised in venture funding, right, to be able to allocate to companies. So you're talking about a machine of a company that invests in companies, expects a return, and when they invest, they double down on the investment. I mean, they're the company that put about $200-300 million into Clubhouse, valuing it at $4 billion. Clubhouse hasn't turned a profit yet. They have very strong conviction on the ideas of how the future of internet and social and digital is going. They are very particular right now about not investing in ad business models. Not saying they have some mantra that we're not investing in ads anymore, but from what I've seen from the partners, from what I've seen of the actual investments that they've made, which are all public, you can see when they invest in a company, every one of these companies is oriented around crypto and blockchain. I mean, every one of those companies are oriented around decentralized models of actually of allowing people to communicate on platforms. And the thing about when it's decentralized, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a second, is that you're not really centralizing attention to be able to run ads to it anymore. So when you have multi-billion dollar venture capital firms not liking the advertising model anymore and not choosing to work with startups, not saying that they're against them, but just like not being as excited to work with startups that are pursuing ads, especially when you already have the big 6, 7, I forgot to add LinkedIn in that original list, incumbents that are monetizing from advertising, you start to recognize there's going to be less opportunities for new companies to benefit off advertising as a business model. So what's the next business model? Subscriptions, right? Subscriptions is a phenomenal business model as well because it's very simple. You like music? Give Spotify $10 a month. You got music. You like content? Give Netflix $16 a month. You got content. Even YouTube. Give YouTube $12 a month. You've got YouTube without ads, right? So it's very interesting to understand that a lot of businesses are starting to recognize, okay, if we can build out a subscription economy and we can provide a product that has such good value where we don't even have to negotiate with advertisers, we don't have to deal with data-driven intelligence of targeting because all we need is data on our customers and their willingness to put their credit card and pay $15 a month for our content, then you've got a fundamentally different business model going into the next 10, 20 years. And this cannot be understated. This is not some pie in the sky, oh, ads are always going to be around. We need to, like whatever for subscriptions, which ultimately I think ads will always be around. But it's important to recognize this because a lot of businesses are getting very successful off subscriptions. Calm is a mental health app. That last, I think, was valued at around $2 billion. They just print money because there's a lot of anxiety in the world. The pandemic that we had over the past year and a half has created a lot more anxiety and depression, and people can't really afford therapists. Their health insurance doesn't pay for it. If I can pay some app $6 a month to just listen to calming stuff that reduces my anxiety, $6 a month is a bargain for reducing your anxiety. Right? So you've got these types of subscription-based models. You've got obviously your Netflixes of the world, your HBO Maxes of the world. You've got a lot of startups that I'm seeing that are just like apps that like help you become more productive, right? Like let you take notes, but like not just on your notes app, but they optimize this whole digital experience for letting you take notes, $4 or $5 a month. And we're getting to the point where consumers are like, you know what? I'd rather pay the $4 or $5 a month and just like be able to use the service if the service is phenomenal. That's the caveat here. The service has to be phenomenal in order for consumers to actually be able to take out their wallets and pay for that stuff. And consumers in general don't really like ads anymore, which is why subscription models, I think, are something to think about in the context of Adtheorent. Now, this is something I wanted to just put out there because it's important to recognize that if you're investing in a data-driven company that's revolving around machine learning for advertising, but advertising as a macro-level economy is declining just in terms of digital, because this is a digital startup or digital advertising data company, and digital companies are choosing to go the subscription route, then that's a thing to think about if this is necessarily going to be the most successful investment. The second thing is decentralization. So I've done a couple of videos on it before. I'm going to do more videos to really get my thoughts on this and really fully break it down. Decentralization is when blockchain technology is used for platforms to be created that aren't centralized anymore. Centralized meaning going in one place. So think of Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They're centralized entities where all the attention is amalgamated in one place. And when all their attention is there, advertisers obviously can go there to reach people. These companies have built advertising models, very simple for companies to make ads, target them. Targeting is very good. You make some money on your ads, right? Or you get some ROIs. If everything is decentralized in the future, if there is a decentralized YouTube, decentralized Twitter, decentralized Facebook, I don't think this is going to happen, but let's say it was, and the startups, again, that Andreessen Horowitz and other venture capital firms are investing in are specifically focused on this being the new frontier of computing, the new frontier of how people are engaging in the social and digital world. Again, here's a quick example. You think of a product like Clubhouse, they don't even ask you for your gender when you sign up. I mean, that's a big deal, right? If they don't ask you for your gender when you sign up, that means they're not using ads to target ads against, because you need someone's gender to be able to target ads against them, right? Like, am I targeting a guy or girl? Like, what's going on? But if you don't have their gender, then they're just not going ads. They raised $300 million. They're valued at $4 billion. They're not running ads, right? So you think more about these types of startups that are getting investment funding that are not relying on advertising as a fundamental trajectory for their business. If that is true and things become more decentralized, there's not a centralized entity that has all the content, but every computer in the network of users runs a bit of the network on their computers throughout the entire world. And then there is a token from a cryptocurrency perspective that is monetizable, which allows those users to then buy the token. And then the value of the network increases, the value of the token increases, which is where the network effects ultimately start becoming prevalent. Again, I'll do more videos breaking that concept down, but that's sort of the idea of decentralized business models. Then you don't have space for ads, because you have to have a centralized authority that is able to monitor the targeting and efficiency of those ads. Otherwise, advertisers will just never trust the thing that they're advertising, right? And you need that level of trust in order for advertisers to actually use the product or service to get people's attention. If people's attention in and of itself is decentralized, then advertising just doesn't make any sense. These are the two major issues I see with this investment. I'm not saying they are bad. They are things that are ultimately going to hinder the investment from not being successful, but it is something to think about. The culture of Palantir is anti-ads. The world, from a subscription perspective and a decentralization perspective, is seeming to go anti-ads, but they're investing in a startup that is already rooted around machine learning, AI automation for advertising. However, I do believe that these risks are mitigated by one fundamental thesis, and that's why I am bullish on this investment. Now, I'm not as bullish on this investment or this SPAC deal as some of the other SPAC deals that they've done, like Wejo, which is like automated cars and like the data around automated or autonomous driving and the amount of different OEMs that Wejo's going to be providing data to and stuff like that. Like that's a really big bullish SPAC call, especially given Palantir's integration with data at scale. The reason I'm still bullish on this investment, even though I do think there are some risks to it, is that every single business in the world and every single creative in the world, person who's creating content online in the world, needs to get someone's attention. Now, either you have two routes to it. Either you create organic content and that organic content scales because the content is really good, you know how to work within algorithms on platforms, and you're very consistent with creating content. You're just a good creator, right? You can get attention that way. Or you can pay for ads. And most businesses in the world simply don't have the ability to create content that's meaningful and compelling enough to get people to actually care about it, right? So what do they have to do? They got to run some ads, right? Because they got to be able to get attention from people, and they have the budgets to do it. So they're like, all right, well, let's use this money. Let's get some attention. Let's get some money going in this business. Let's get more people knowing about who we are, and let's get to work. If that thesis statement is true, which I don't think anyone can necessarily argue, then that means there will always be a model or a business for advertising. The fundamental question of if this investment will be successful, which will make Adtheorent successful, which will make Palantir successful because they have an equity stake within this company, and this company is using them as a client, is will digital advertising still continue to be the model by which businesses reach people's attention? Now, that question even sounds crazy for me to say out loud. Why does this sound crazy for me to say? Because radio and television used to be the main models, or even before that, newspaper, right? And it seems like there's 6 billion people with smartphones, right? 4 billion people online. It seems very obvious that the attention is simply not in those areas anymore, right? The attention is in the attention economy, which is Facebook, Google, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Pinterest, etc. As long as these platforms exist and they have our attention, and they have our attention at some level, even if there's subscription platforms, even if some platforms are decentralized, as long as these centralized authoritative platforms exist, and maybe some new ones that are started, right? No one saw TikTok really coming until it came and became one of the biggest short form video, media companies in the world, or platforms in the world, then there will be a market for Adtheorent to be able to serve its clients, because there will be a market of clients that are willing to advertise on these platforms. I believe that this will continue to happen. I am very bullish on centralized platforms actually retaining their dominance, because for all the concerns about privacy and censorship and all this stuff, at the end of the day, they let people reach an audience. I would not be here unless YouTube existed and you would be able to use YouTube to get me and find my video. I am very grateful, if I'm being extremely honest, that platforms like these exist, because they give an opportunity for you to get an audience. I think long-term, advertising is still a phenomenal business model. And the reason I think advertising is a phenomenal business model is because at the end of the day, there are three main beneficiaries of advertising that creates the business opportunities that I think are very meaningful. Number one are the advertisers themselves. They get a desired audience based on search-based targeting. So I know your interests, I know the things you're searching for, I know the things you consume on these platforms, therefore I'm able to put creative in front of you that's going to get you to be able to convert, and that's going to drive business results for the advertiser. Second is the consumer. I do think, as much as consumers say we hate ads, we don't like paying for certain things. So we'll pay for Netflix, but if you ask me to pay $10 for Facebook, you're out of your mind. I'm not paying $10 a month for Facebook, because like even Instagram, like I love Instagram, but like I'm not, like that's a lot of money to justify just going through social media posts. And most of the world that's on Facebook and Instagram, it's not just North America and Europe, right? They don't have the most disposable income in the world to just dish out, 10 times 12, $120 per year just to use these platforms to look at some memes, right? That's just not how most of the world operates. If that's the case, then that means that these platforms will continue to always operate via an advertising business model. And if they're operating via an advertising business model, then that means advertisers will always have media to target their content in front of. Consumers now, going to my second point, will enjoy the ads if the platforms and companies like Adtheorent can actually synchronize the targeting to be extremely powerful. So if I'm on Instagram and I see an ad for how to grow your YouTube channel, right, and I'm a aspiring YouTuber, I'm going to click on it, right, because I'm interested in that stuff. Good, you got my attention because you know what I care about based upon all the other actions I've taken on the platform, and then you've been able to get my attention on something. And then maybe there's some, I don't know, plugin that helps you better understand your YouTube channel that I pay $5 a month for. That is the life cycle of this. But that is a meaningful thing in my life as a consumer, because the ads that I got, the opportunities that I discovered were only available on a centralized platform that used machine learning and AI data intelligence at scale to actually be able to optimize the advertising results that were ultimately coming in front of me as I'm scrolling through Instagram, and being able to convert on those ads. So as a consumer, I'm still bullish on advertising. I know ads can sometimes be annoying, especially video ads on YouTube. Those can be annoying sometimes. But if a good video ad pops up, which is what YouTube spends billions of dollars to make sure happens, then you have a better experience at the end of the day, and it allows the content to be free, and it allows the platforms to operate. The third party that benefits the most from an advertising business model, which I ultimately think is why it's going to work long term, at least over the next 10, 20 years, are creators. I mean, this is very important to understand that YouTube, there's average YouTubers making $10,000 a month on ads. Simply, and they're not the most special people in the world, but $10,000 a month is like $120,000 a year for someone who's making videos, theoretically, right? So you've got to recognize, like, this is one of the most amazing creative opportunities to be alive, because if you can communicate and you can create on a platform like YouTube, you can get attention to the point where there's real dollars on the back end of this, right? This is not like a joke at the end of the day. That only happens with an advertising business model. At the end of the day, ads are what pay the bills for Google. I mean, how does Google make the billions of dollars, like $60 billion a year? There's 2 little search results that have a little ad in front of it when you type something on Google. Boom. That's it. That's how they make their money. So creators have the ability to benefit from their content being monetized through advertising. And I don't think it's the most craziest thing in the world, because, for example, if you started a podcast, like, how do podcasts monetize? They get a sponsor, right? How do some channels monetize? They get a sponsor. Instagram influencers are sponsored. At the end of the day, the only thing you can do with attention, if you're not just creating for the sake of creating it, is monetize that attention if you have to build it into a business. And the only way you monetize is either the attention pays you something, or you give something to the attention for an exchange of value, i.e. a sponsorship, in order for that monetization of that audience to be successful. And it's very difficult to get people to pay you. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So if it's very difficult to get people to pay you, it's much more easier for there to be a sponsorship. And if that sponsorship is effective, then you can be able to pay your bills at night because you have the attention. I think that at scale on platforms like Google and Facebook are ultimately what's going to justify the ability for advertising to retain itself over the coming decade, because these centralized platforms give opportunities to advertisers, consumers, and creators. As long as those platforms exist, Adtheorent and other companies like it that are integrated with Palantir's Foundry software, that are integrated with data-driven decision-making platforms, will have a market opportunity to go after. The risks I presented in this video were if subscriptions and decentralized business models become so wide that advertising declines at such a rapid pace that, from a digital perspective, that there's not even a market to advertise to or a market opportunity to go after, because there's no ads to sell on any of these platforms. I wanted to present those risks because I think it's important to represent, but I ultimately don't think those risks win at the end of the day. At the end of the day, you need to get people's attention, and if you need to get people's attention, there have to be businesses in place that centralize that attention, and once that attention is centralized, then advertising as a framework for being able to monetize off the backs of that attention can exist as well. Very big market opportunity. Media is very interesting. It was interesting to learn about this because Palantir is not into ads, but they obviously want data to drive the world. Long-term thoughts, trajectory for this partnership: if these platforms continue to exist over the next 10 years and Adtheorent becomes one of the strongest AI machine learning optimized platforms in order to provide predictive targeting, geointelligence, cross-environmental mapping, and studio, artificial and art and technology with creative behind the paid, which is what I just read off their website because I forgot to mention it throughout this entire video. Those are sort of their 4 main tenets. Then that can scale phenomenally well as long as advertising remains intact. But advertising has to remain intact. That is the takeaway from this video. There has to be a business opportunity for ads to still exist. And as long as that still exists, there's going to be a lot of data to drive those ads, to make those ads effective. If there is no data, those ads are not effective, which means the opportunity does not exist. Palantir's Foundry can integrate with platforms like Adtheorent to make them the smartest data intelligence platforms in the world in order to get advertisers a result. I don't think ads are going anywhere. I think there are some risks associated with it, but at the end of the day, I philosophically believe that people want to go where the content is. The content is going to go where people is, which is centralization. people are less willing to pay for things that are subscription oriented because they want things that are for free, especially if the experience they get is very minimal, i.e. liking something versus music or movies, which means then there's going to be a market opportunity for advertisers, which means then there's going to be the ability for Adtheorent to hopefully become a massive, massive company. So those are my thoughts. I definitely wanted to get my thoughts out on advertising because I've been thinking about it for a while, and I was like, this is a good video to actually like really put my thoughts out there and see what people think. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think about this partnership. Let me know what you guys think about the future of the advertising market in the comments. I look forward to reading them as always. My name is Amit. This is the Daily Business Show, and I'll see you in the next one.